Hello and welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast, your source for Overwatch news, strategy, and general discussion. I'm your host, Jam, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff. How you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very good. I'm actually really excited to talk about our character breakdowns for today, as well as some other news and things that have been coming up in the Overwatch world.
Yeah, a lot to cover today. So let's just kick it off with the announcement. They said that they are going to have a new animated short coming. It's the first one in a while. Our last one was Soldier, if I recall. And so we're going to have, looks like a Bastion animated short coming August 18th at Gamescom, which is the big convention in Germany. So that's pretty exciting. I know you're a big fan of Bastion.
Oh, yeah. I love Bastion. As far as the story, it's definitely one of my favorite in Overwatch. As I mentioned last episode, definitely not one of my favorite characters to play, but I will absolutely welcome a new animated short. I love those. I think they're a great way of telling the story and giving, a little more personality and detail to all of the characters. And, I believe this most recent one with Bastion is going to be called The Last Bastion, and it kind of goes, I assume, into his lore and where he came from. So really, really excited to see that and hoping to see some action as well. So, yeah, that's going to be very exciting, and August 18th can't come quick enough.
Yeah, they've done a really good job with the short so far, and I'll admit that back when I was being stubborn about Soldier, I think that his animated short was probably the beginning of me caving in to falling in love with Soldier. So you never know. I could come on here in a few weeks and be raving about how much I love Bastion, but don't hold your breath.
He's going to be number one for you on characters played. I know it.
That's going to take some time. But the other thing about Gamescom, I had mentioned in a previous episode, there's a lot of speculation about perhaps getting a new map or some other sort of unveiling at that convention. So I'm interested to see if maybe this animated short announcement is to get everyone's eyes focused on Gamescom, and then maybe they roll out a new map or something. Yeah,
that would be really, really awesome. They've already mentioned that they were working on at least 2 new maps, which I think everybody pretty much assumed that there were going to be new maps coming at some point down the pipeline. But if it's sooner rather than later, that would be very, very exciting. We had mentioned in previous episode that we thought that maybe Germany would be a good pick for, Reinhardt, as well as Paris or Sydney. I think any of those would be great, and I really hope that whatever new map does come in, that it's radically different from the maps we've seen before and takes maybe a whole different type of landscape, or if it is another city, it is a lot different from what we've seen in Kings Row or Numbani.
I think a convention in Germany would be the natural place to unveil a Germany map, as I've said before, so that would seem like a no-brainer to me, but yeah, we'll have to keep our eyes out for that. The other, there's been some interesting stuff going on, speculation-wise, with regards to potentially our next character unveil. I know we had talked a little bit about the name Sombra being out there, but it seems, especially with the latest patch with the Summer Games, that there's a lot of hidden gems out there regarding Sombra. So if I recall, she's supposed to be something of a hacker as well as a stealth character, and so it seems like they're kind of tying that all together. Is that, am I on point with that?
Yeah, absolutely on point with that. So we've mentioned Sombra in the past before, and she's definitely been a topic of discussion in the Overwatch community, but I'll kind of go a little more into detail into it now because Blizzard has been playing a really fun game with its fans and dropping Easter eggs and hints that they've been doing since actually before the game was released, with the inclusion of files that had Sombra's name on them in-game. In Dorado, there was actually a newspaper that said "Quién es Sombra?", which is "Who is Sombra?" in Spanish. It had this picture of this character that was wearing some sort of cloak and looked very mysterious. And then, of course, with the release of Ana, there was a lot of confusion that Sombra was Ana and vice versa. But now that we know who Ana is and we've seen her look and her different skins, we know that Sombra is someone completely different. But what's really, really interesting is that there have been, specifically in a lot of the videos, either the developer updates or in most recently was the Summer Games trailer, there have been a lot of little hidden codes within the videos For example, I think one of the biggest ones that it took the community as a whole and a lot of Reddit detectives to solve was there was the Anna Origins trailer. And, that was the one where they kind of showed her storyline and how she lost her eye and why she left Overwatch and disappeared for years. There were a couple points in that trailer, one at the very end and also one right before she gets shot in the eye, that there was a white flash. And if you broke down that white flash, there was a series of numbers hidden in there. So this is one of those crazy kind of games that Blizzard's playing where they're dropping hints, and these numbers eventually turned out to be a series of patterns and codes that people put through the gauntlet of different hex decoders and binary decoders, and ultimately they've all come out to Spanish phrases, and the assumption is that Sombra is going to be some sort of Hispanic type hero that were all giving hints that it's actually Sombra that are putting these codes in the video. So really, really cool way of telling the story. One of the first ones that was decoded was a quote that was just repeated over and over again in Spanish, and it said, "She who has the information has the power." So there you go right there is another clarification that Sombra is a female. And then the she who has the information part is interesting because we're getting all these sort of binary and hex codes, and then we have these messages being put hidden throughout the videos. It seems that she may actually be a hacker as well as a stealth character, which would be a really, really cool way to kind of create a brand new style of play and combat for a new character in Overwatch.
I just think it's so cool that they're going through all this effort to put this stuff out there. I mean, I'm certainly not the person that's going to be decrypting and decoding it all, but I'm fully supportive of the people that are, and I'm anxious to see what they come up with. But just the fact that they're going through all this stuff, I mean, also with the animated shorts, I mean, those are a little bit less intensive, I would say, but just in general, I mean, at its core, Overwatch is just a game of 6-on-6 PvP repeated, but the fact that they're building this look and feel around it and these stories around it is really cool, and it really adds to the game in a way that it's hard to quantify, and I didn't necessarily expect it going in, but I've been pretty happy with it. One other thing I noticed, I kind of read through a little bit of the Sombra stuff, and it sounded like the number 23 had been coming up a lot, and there was some speculation about maybe August 23rd is the day after the Summer Games end, and is a Tuesday, I believe, which is their typical patch day. So some people seem to have pinpointed that day as significant.
Yeah, it's very significant because, like you said, not only is it when the Summer Games end, so that's the end of this season of fun new content that Blizzard has come out with, but it's also a Tuesday, which means that's usually when we get our patch updates. And Sombra, if she is announced, would be the 23rd character coming right after Anna, who was 22nd. So a lot of the numbers, yeah, it's all lining up. It's really crazy. This is something that's called an ARG. They've been calling it the Sombra ARG, which is stands for Alternate Reality Game. And it's basically an interactive storytelling method used throughout the game to kind of tease information and lore about the characters. And I'm a really big fan of this style of storytelling and revealing info because as opposed to having a standard story mode that a lot of games have, and I'm sure a lot of people wanted previous to the release of Overwatch, it's a real cool way to kind of get the community involved. I mean, we have literally thousands of people looking into this information, decoding this hints and Easter eggs throughout the trailers and at the end of the developer updates. And it shows that there is an interest. So getting the story kind of by word of mouth, I think really strengthens the lore of the game and just general interest. And, you know, when you hear about stories about these characters and their relationships with each other, instead of hearing them from necessarily a in-game cinematic, you're hearing them from other people who are playing the game. And, oh, did you hear about Sombra? That apparently it's a new character. And then rumors get started. I think it's really exciting, and it's a really cool, creative, and dynamic way to tell a story.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's way cooler than if they just put out a little cinematic that said Sombra's a hacker. But instead, yeah, I mean, they've got all these people looking into it and creating their own rumors and hopes and then talking about it. So, yeah, it's a different way to get it out there, and I'm sure that this is exactly what they want. And Blizzard never fails to impress me with some of the storytelling that they do. So it's been pretty awesome. I guess if Sombra's a hacker, we're probably going to need, I don't know, someone like Athena to protect Overwatch's software.
Oh my God, we'll definitely get into Athena on another episode, because I have so many theories about Athena. But just to close out the Sombra topic, the most recent developments as of the time that we're recording this, who knows what'll be discovered afterwards, is that the Summer Games trailer had a code that was found inside of the trail. So when Tracer does her new heroic intro, the track and field one where she jumps, when you paused the video, there was actually a code of like a series of numbers or letters inside of the blue kind of trace line that's behind her when she's jumping. And as of right now, that hasn't been solved. There are a lot of theories on the different patterns and what it could be. They're putting it through the gauntlet of different decoders, but right now we still don't know what it is. So it's a work in progress, and we'll see where it ends up.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, I'm anxious to see where it goes. So on to the actual in-game business. It sounds like there's a rumor out there as of this evening that we're going to see a Zenyatta nerf. Sounds like people are upset about Orb of Discord, which does not surprise me at all. That feeling had been out there for several weeks since he got buffed and was getting played like 98% of the time. Yeah, I'd say Discord feels a little bit strong right now. What do you think?
I would probably have to agree with that. I think that if you're a Zenyatta fan and you're playing him, you're probably crying foul, and there's no need to nerf him because he was just buffed and he's just become this awesome character that is now a lot more playable. I think the issue with Zenyatta before was his survivability. He wasn't ever bad in my eyes, but he was definitely a challenge because he went down so quickly. So now that that's no longer the case, and he's a little bit more robust and he survives higher HP, quicker movement speed with his ult, he is a little harder to kill. So that being said, it takes his existing strength that he already had, and it puts his Orb of Discord right at the spotlight with this 50% extra damage taken by enemies. Tanks are going down really, really quick. And a lot of people are arguing that for a support character, maybe that isn't necessarily the main direction you want to focus on. He should be a little more focused on being more balanced. As a healer, he's pretty good, but you see him doing a lot more damage as an attacker than healing. So that being said, I think the whole idea behind Zenyatta and his character and his lore is that he's supposed to be this almost Buddhist-inspired character where everything is balanced. And, if you're looking at a straight-up balanced character, you want him to be equally as good as supporting as he is at attacking. So that being said, yeah, I think maybe a slight drop. I hope they don't go too crazy. A lot of people are throwing out numbers. I'm seeing a lot of 30% from people in the community saying that they'd be happy with that instead of 50. I think that might be good. I'm sure Blizzard's playtesting a lot of it as we speak. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that he is a little overpowered, or do you think he's good where he is right now?
Well, I think he probably is. I think when you see numbers like that from the pros where they're picking him like 98% of the time, those guys put so much time into, researching if it'll give you like a 0.5% advantage, they'll do it. So when the numbers are that strong in that direction, I think that there's obviously something that needs to be looked at. I'm a big fan of Zenyatta, and I was before his buff, so it sort of discourages me a bit to see him immediately get nerfed again, but I think it's highlighted because it's the only debuff of its kind in the game, so it really stands out right now. Maybe in the future, if there's a character that can apply some sort of buff where, like maybe a tank takes 50% less damage, and then Orb of Discord could offset that, maybe that would feel more balanced. But since there's nothing like that in the game right now, it really stands out. So I'm not surprised, and it's probably appropriate based on his selection numbers and based on how fast he's melting tanks.
Yeah, it's tough to say because when you're creating a game that's competitive like Overwatch, you're playing rock, paper, scissors, essentially, with 22 characters. and each of those characters having a myriad of abilities. So balance is really, really tricky, especially when you have 4 different classes and everybody fights so differently. I can't even imagine what they have to go through to get everything as balanced as possible before even letting the gamers play test it, essentially, in the PTR or in the actual game itself. So, yeah, I think that them playing with those numbers and kind of throwing it out there and seeing how the community deals with it is probably going to be the best thing to do. But like I said, I'm not necessarily opposed to them nerfing him a little bit, but I just hope it doesn't get to the point where, you know, at least at my skill level, I'm not having fun with him anymore, because he is just a joy to play. And I do agree with you. He was a lot of fun before the buff, but he's definitely a lot more fun now.
Yeah, definitely. So I will say, though, just in general right now, I think the game is, as well, more balanced than it has been at any point so far. Not to say that there isn't still work that could be done, but I'm pretty happy with the fact that there isn't like an automatic selection out of any grouping right now. Like, you know, there was a while where you picked double McCree every time. You always had to have a Reinhardt, and you always had to have a Mercy. And I feel like right now, I mean, there's a case to be made for 4 or maybe all 5 tanks, and all the supports are viable if you know how to play Ana. And even with the attacking characters, I mean, I feel like it's very situational as far as the map and who you're going against on, you know, whether you would want McCree or Soldier or Pharah for straight line damage. And then all the flankers, I think, can be played well. So, I mean, I think that they'll probably look into giving the defense characters some love, but just in general, I mean, there isn't one character that's a must-pick right now, which is a good sign, I think.
Yeah, I think having a situation that we're in right now where you can see a whole bunch of different types of comps that are effective is probably where we want to be with the game. Not to say that there is not maybe slight tweaks in balancing that needs to happen, but it's definitely a complete change from how it was, you know, in the earlier stages of the game, where there were specific comps, you know, your Reinhardt, Mercy, and 2 McCrees, and, you know, a lot of these comps we were seeing that everybody was just going to because that was, quote-unquote, the way to win, and that was just what you had to choose. So it's really nice to see a mix of comps and characters. I'm super happy about that because I want every character to be playable, as I'm sure Blizzard does as well. And, yeah, I like that you bring up, you know, as long as you know how to use Ana, because there's definitely discussion in a lot of the chat logs of the games I'm playing where a lot of people still think that she's not a good character, which I think is laughable because, as we said before, when they announced her and we tried her out a little bit, that Ana is definitely a higher skill character. You definitely need to be a little better with the Twitch type mechanics of the game. It's not going to be like Lucio where you're just standing around someone, or even Mercy where it's essentially a tracking heal. A lot of people consider those 2 characters better healers, but I don't know. I think that's debatable. I don't necessarily agree or disagree, but I think based on how good someone is with Ana, they can really make a difference and really be a substantial healer as well as an attack character similar to Zenyatta. So, yeah, just because it's a little harder to do something with a character, I don't think it means that they're necessarily bad. But, you know, that remains to be seen. Like you said, we're seeing a rotation of character selection, and that's good. That's interesting, and I'm glad that people at least are having these discussions.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned Ana. I mean, I had a match with her just today where I had like double-digit enemies slept. At least 3 of those were ult shutdowns, and you know, you feel really impactful when you play Ana, and I have so much fun playing her. But then it turns around at the end of the game, and I've just got like some bronze and silver medals, even in healing, done. So there are times where maybe it's an illusion in my own head, but it feels like I'm doing a lot more than the numbers would say, or maybe she does more than what the numbers would indicate. I don't know exactly what the answer is there, but I really love playing her, even if it doesn't always come out to 4 or 5 gold medals.
I think the mystery that kind of surrounds that whole issue is that no one's really entirely sure how a lot of these medals are kind of dished out to people. Like, we know that there's solid numbers like damage done and healing done, and they give you your cards for specific things. But when you're looking at the parameters of play of the game and how well you're performing, because each character plays so differently, you're really judging them all on a completely different scale. So Anna's the newest character. I feel like maybe there's things she's excelling at because, in those matches, I was playing some of those matches with you where you were Anna. We were winning. I mean, we were doing a good job, and your Anna was very effective. But I'm wondering if there's parameters and aspects that the game's maybe not picking up yet because this is a new character, and maybe they haven't implemented it yet. Because I'll be completely honest, I've yet to see a play of the game with Anna at all. And I'm sure they're out there, but if it is out there, it seems, at least to me, very, very rare. And that seems a little unfair to somebody who is maining that character and plays them a lot and maybe would like to get a little bit of recognition for doing well with that character.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have not seen a play of the game with Anna either. And, I've hypothesized that maybe if you sleep someone in an ult and then throw her grenade and happen to get 2 killing blows with it or something like that, I mean, I know there's a formula that goes into that, and, you see Mercy get it for a big res, or I've seen Zenyatta get it if he uses Transcendence and blocks another ult and saves a bunch of people, or something like that. So supports can get it, but Anna, it's tough to figure because her ult is most likely going to give it to someone else. So, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what goes into that formula for play of the game. And the cards as well. I mean, you see some funny stats pop up sometimes, and you're like, I didn't even know it would track that, or what, why did it give me that? I did something else way better. But, yeah, I mean, just in general, I think that it's a lot of fun to play Anna, even if it's hard to figure out exactly what they're looking for in terms of her numbers.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it's a brand new character, that's only a few weeks in, and since her release, we've already seen a couple changes to her throughout the patches, buffing her and making her more viable as a healer. So who knows what's going to happen in the future. I think it's exciting to see where it goes with all of the characters. I do like where a lot of the characters are going as far as the rebalancing, and it seems like a lot of the community does too. So yeah, it's going to be fun to see, especially with any new maps and new characters that are announced. It's just going to flip everything topsy-turvy again, so we'll see what happens.
Hard work pays off.
So Torbjorn Lindholm is a 57-year-old weapons designer from Sweden. He is one of the original founding members of Overwatch. And just to go back into his lore a little bit, before the Omnic Wars, Torbjorn was a world-famous weapons and technology designer, best of the best, really, really good at his job. And because of that, he was very well respected in the world. So he had a deep mistrust for artificial intelligence, and a lot of people would criticize him for this and say that was paranoia and it's just, increasing technology. And wouldn't you know it, he called it, because then the Omnic War happened, and tons of people died due to the Omnics, or robots, basically turning on their human creators and slaughtering them by the thousands. So he has a major problem with artificial intelligence. So where we are in the story at this point, he became a founding member of Overwatch. They used his weapons and technology. He designed a whole lot of their tech and gear, including Reinhardt's Crusader armor. So eventually, when Overwatch disbanded, Torbjorn decided that his main goal would be to go out into the world and still help out, because he feels that a lot of the weapons and technology that he created are now in the wrong hands, and he feels guilty for that and has to go out and stop them from being used by evil people. So sort of your Dwarven Tony Stark type character. I think he's super, super cool in the lore, and he's also very, very different as far as gameplay style goes.
Yeah, Torb is pretty hilarious. I like his backstory a lot, and obviously dwarves need to be represented in every Blizzard game. I will say, as far as playstyle, I've always, from launch, I had always lumped him in with Bastion as kind of, the turret characters. But he's grown on me a little bit. He doesn't bother me as much as he used to on other teams, and I'll pick him once in a while. He's definitely not my number one selected character, but he can be fun as a change of pace, both in the game and also, just personally, when you're playing a bunch of different characters. it can be fun to swap onto the engineer and drop some turrets and give people grief.
Yeah, Torbjorn is a character that lies in the defense class of Overwatch. So he's grouped together with characters like Widowmaker and Bastion. But he fights very different from either of those because he is actually one of your token builder characters. So the idea of Torbjorn being a creator of technology and weapons, naturally he does this in the battle. So his entire kit is kind of based on someone who builds turrets, and he also has a couple ways of defending himself with weapons, including a hammer and a rivet gun. Yeah, when I initially saw Torbjorn, he wasn't necessarily on the top of my list for characters to play, but I did really, really like the idea, and I think the most interesting thing about him is that as opposed to being an in-your-face type of fighter, which he absolutely can be if you play him that way, he's a little more based on having map knowledge and really deciding where you want to build some of these turrets and being super, super knowledgeable about the structures in the game, places for cover, and it's a really cool style of gameplay.
Yeah, he's very unique. There's no doubt about that. I think he's probably most effective against like new players or uncoordinated teams, just because we'll get into the specifics of the turret, but essentially, he puts the turret down and then he can move around and the turret will fire on its own, auto fire. So it can take some coordination to take them out instead of people just charging at it one at a time. But it's also funny that he's been considered a real problem on console, where they had to nerf him and people are just picking 6 Torbjorn and wiping everyone else out. Whereas on PC, I think he's considered to be a lot more manageable on the opposing team. So that's just an interesting distinction. I mean, I think in general, I would call him a low floor, low to medium ceiling character. I think he's pretty easy to pick up and play, even on your first couple of matches. As you're figuring him out, the turret will do its job, whether you know how to play or not. But once you get to the higher end, he can be dealt with by a coordinated team. I mean, you see him a little bit in high end. It can be a little bit tricky, but if a really good Torb knows where to put their turret so that it doesn't just get taken out at the beginning of a fight, he also has some support ability, and he can kind of manage on his own without the turret as well. So he's somewhat viable if you're really fond of Torb or really good with Torb, even on the high-end scene.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up his difficulty because on Blizzard's Overwatch website, he's actually considered a 2-star difficulty character, and they rate their characters by 1 to 3 stars. So he's what you would consider a medium difficulty as far as being able to use. And I don't completely disagree with that. I think that there definitely is some skill required, but he's definitely not going to be as easy as, say, choosing Bastion and sticking into Sentry mode and just doing ridiculous damage. So it does take a little bit of skill. So let's go ahead and dive into his abilities and some of his stats, because he is an interesting character and there's a lot of different ways you can play him. So his base hit points are 200. So he has 200 health, pretty standard for a defensive character. He can take a few hits, but he's not going to go in and start tanking anything. His main attacking weapon is the rivet gun. So the rivet gun is really cool because it's this sort of weapon that he pours molten metal into, and he presumably uses it to build a lot of his weapons and technology, but he also uses it as a attacking weapon. So the rivet gun has 2 firing modes. The first is the main fire. It has 18 full capacity of ammo, and each of the regular main shots does 70 damage. It takes about 2 seconds to reload the gun, and it has a firing rate of 1.6 rounds per second. So not a machine gun by any means, but it is a pretty decent speed, and 70 damage is nothing to laugh at. It's actually a pretty substantial amount of damage.
Yeah, his main fire is fairly effective. I mean, he's not going to be a sniper or anything, but the 70 damage has no damage fall off. So there's a significant arc on the shots, but once you get the hang of the arc, he can be just as effective from max range as he can up close with the main fire. So it's funny because Torb kind of has this reputation as he just builds a turret and then he repairs it all the time. But he can be pretty viable on his own, and I think a lot of people underestimate that.
Yeah, for sure. And also, these shots do count for more damage if you attack them with a headshot. So that being said, I mean, 70 damage, you land 2 good shots, you're already close to taking out a character like Tracer or even Zenyatta if they've already taken some damage. So that's pretty good for just a standard weapon. The alternate fire of the rivet gun is a charge shot, which is a little bit more of a shotgun blast type shot. It uses 3 ammo per shot, so that's 3 per quote-unquote shotgun blast of your full 18 ammo clip. And it does about 60 to 150 damage based on the fall-off distance, where you hit them, if it's a headshot or not. And it shoots at about the same rate as the main fire as well. So, yeah, he has a medium to long-range option and a close-range option that does a significant amount of more damage. And that is pretty effective for a character that's not considered an attack class.
Yeah, his alt-fire is pretty effective, especially if you're hanging out by your turret to repair and you get rushed by like a Genji or a Tracer. You can really fend them off with this alt fire in close quarters. It's stronger than you'd think. Even a tank like Winston, if you headshot him a few times with some of the bursts, it will take him out pretty quickly. So do not underestimate his alt fire either.
Absolutely, yeah. I've definitely out-shotgunned a few Reapers here and there with him, so do not underestimate his rivet gun. His next weapon is interesting. So Torbjorn is a character who can actually switch weapons. The only other character currently in the game who can do that is Mercy. And he actually can switch between his rivet gun or his forge hammer. So he fights with a gun and a hammer. The hammer is basically... its main function is to build and repair turrets, but we'll get to that a little later. I'm going to go ahead and kind of cover it as a weapon for the time being. The hammer is exactly what you'd imagine. It's just a close-range weapon, and it does 75 damage. So it is a melee attack, and I feel that there might be a lot of people who maybe have never touched or have no interest in Torbjorn, might not know that. You can do 75 damage with his hammer. And it is, it's a hammer, so he could do it over and over again without reloading. This is significant because a normal melee attack, I believe, does about 30 damage. And 75 damage is actually the same amount of damage that Reinhardt's hammer does as well, which is kind of curious because Torbjorn did design Reinhardt's weapon and armor. So, yeah, surprising amount of power for a little guy.
Yeah, this feels like one of those things that was left in the game by mistake. And then when they found out about it, they just thought it was hilarious and they left it in. I mean, seriously, it's just, it shouldn't do that much damage.
It seems ridiculous.
And if you think that's funny, wait till you get Torb coming at you with his hammer out and he's nano boosted from an Ana, because I've seen him get a quad kill with it. So it could be a scary situation, but most of the time you're not going to see that happening. I mean, like you said, a lot of people don't even know that it does damage, and it's definitely not the preferred weapon in combat, I would think.
Yeah, there's definitely something intimidating about a 4-foot guy glowing blue and swinging a hammer angrily around. It's definitely something to avoid. But yeah, so that's his hammer as a weapon. I'm going to go ahead and move on to his next passive ability before I get to the turrets, because there's a lot to say about the turrets. So his passive ability is collect scrap. Torbjorn has this interesting mechanic where he can actually collect scrap from enemies or allies that die on the battlefield. So when you see a person fall, there's actually this kind of cool double gear looking item that appears and just floats with a nice yellow light around it to make it very obvious to see, and then it has a couple double arrows that let you know where it is. So it's very obvious, and this is called scrap. And basically one scrap unit drops per hero that gets slain on the battlefield, and every time you collect one, it provides 25 scrap, and Torbjorn can hold up to 200 scrap. So basically, you'd have to collect 8 of these things to get full 200 scrap. Now, why this is important is because he can actually create armor packs from the scrap. So the ability that Torbjorn has for Armor Pack is essentially an item that he drops down that him or his allies can pick up and boost up their health with a bonus armor. In order to create an armor pack, it requires 50 scrap. So if you're full, you can create 4 armor packs for you and your team. When they pick them up, they provide 75 bonus armor on top of whatever health that ally has. So it's a really interesting way, similar to Symmetra's shield ability to pop shields on her allies. This is a really creative and cool way that kind of falls in line with the engineering aspect of the character, where he actually is running around the battlefield collecting scrap so he can create armor packs for his allies.
This ability is definitely the support aspect of Torbjorn, I'd say. You're right, it's similar to Symmetra, but different in that while it adds to the max health pool, it doesn't increase the max health pool permanently. So when you lose the first 75 health in the next encounter, you can't have that healed back. That's just temporary boost. But yeah, I mean, it's armor, so it's a little bit tougher than regular health, and this is how you can really help out like your mercy or your support by giving them an extra. I mean, 75 is a significant increase to a 200 health point character, so you should definitely use these as often as you can. I mean, especially after a big fight on a point, you'll see a ton of scrap out there. You can actually see the little icon through the wall, so you can know what area it's in if it's not readily visible. But yeah, I mean, I would say this is one of his best team abilities, and you definitely want to try and prioritize, I would say, like trying to get it onto your supports and your tanks.
Yeah, if you're playing a Torbjorn where you're not running around and looking for scrap, you're essentially denying your team extra health that could actually keep them alive and keep the battle going a little longer for them. So as attractive as it is to stay behind cover and just, work on turrets or shoot from afar, actually getting out there, I think this is really one of those things that pull this character out into the battlefield. And they use this mechanic to kind of, you might be in a little more danger if you're out there, but he has, as we said before, he has significant enough strength to defend himself, and hopefully your teammates are helping you out as well. Getting this armor to your team as much as possible is, I think, very, very important, because increasing health is always a good thing. And then, of course, armor has a little bit better defense against certain attacks than just regular health. So you have that added bonus on top of that. And when you use it in conjunction with some other characters, for example, I was in a battle recently where I was Zenyatta and I had both Symmetra's shields and Torbjorn's armor pack. I was running around with a Zenyatta with 300 health, which is pretty crazy for that character. So it does make a difference. Every little bit does count. Moving on to his, probably his most popular and his most iconic ability is his build turret ability. So the build turret, man, there's a lot to say about this one. I don't even know where to start. But we'll go ahead and go with he builds a turret. So essentially, Torbjorn can build a turret on any flat surface, almost any flat surface. When you do activate it, it'll put up kind of a hologram in front of you of what the turret will look like and where it'll be placed. And if it's red, it means that you can't place it there. So a lot of the times there'll be maybe an obstacle in front of you, or the platform will be too small in front of you. It'll be red. The second it turns blue, that means that that is a place that you can put the turret. You drop the turret, and the second you drop it, it's there, it's done, and it is now a level 1 turret. So the turret actually has 3 different stages, and these are all based on how you build up the turret. So when you drop a turret, it's level 1. A level 1 turret has 150 HP. It does 28 damage per second. It only has 1 gun on it, but it fires 2 rounds per second. So, it's just another contraption you have on the battlefield that's doing damage. And what's really cool about it is that it'll auto-aim to the first person it sees on the enemy team and immediately start shooting at them.
These turrets are really interesting. 100% accuracy in their firing rate and no damage fall off can make them pretty effective for covering a large area. And yeah, you mentioned that you build the turret and it goes to level 1 instantly. It just kind of auto builds, so you don't really have to maintain it, which is nice. But you can only have one turret out at a time. Definitely worth noting that. So if you build a second turret, the first turret that you had existing will be destroyed. So then once you have the level 1 turret, you can actually use the hammer that you mentioned before to upgrade that to a level 2 turret, which is what you're going to see most of the time if Torb's had time to set up, because the first thing you want to do to your level 1 turret is upgrade it.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you build the turret, you want to switch to your hammer, and all you have to do is basically hold down your main fire button with the hammer, and the hammer will auto start upgrading the turret. So when you use the hammer, it actually does a couple things. If the turret has taken any damage, it'll actually repair its HP every time you swing the hammer onto the turret. So when you do this, it'll actually heal 50 HP per swing. A turret can't be upgraded until it's fully healed. So if you have a turret that's damaged and you want to level it up, you're going to have to hit it with the hammer a few times to get it at full health. And then once it's at full health, then you start swinging at it in order to upgrade the turret. Now, when the turret is upgraded, it goes from level 1 to level 2. So now there's a few things that change. It goes from 150 HP in the turret to 300. So it doubles its health. It actually gets 2 guns instead of 1 that was on it before. It can fire at 4 rounds per second instead of 2 rounds per second. Makes sense. You're doubling the guns. And then it actually does 57 damage per second instead of 28. So a significant increase in damage and firing speed. And it also has greater longevity because you've doubled its HP. At this point, on a standard playing field, that's the max that your turret can go, up until you use his next ability that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But as Jeff said, the level 2 turret, if Torbjorn's doing his job, if you give him time to set up, a lot of the times if you're playing on defense, you're out on the map first, you're looking for a good spot to drop the turret. Generally, you want the level 2 turret to be up and ready before the enemy even shows up. As Jeff mentioned, there is no fall-off damage, and it actually continues firing indefinitely. It doesn't have to reload at any point. So it's just an infinite shot, continual damage. In level 2, you'll be doing 57 damage per second. That's an auto-aim. So that's just the turret itself. If you put the focus of your attacks with the rivet gun on top of that, you're putting out a decent amount of damage.
Yeah, more than decent, I'd say. You can definitely melt a lot of 200 health point characters with the turret alone, and then if you are contributing as well, then you can definitely clear some folks out of a point. So as far as the turret itself, the mechanics of it, it'll lock the first target it sees and stay on them unless they lose line of sight, or if they die, or if they go out of range, which is essentially the same thing as losing line of sight. So it'll stay locked onto a target as long as it can see them. And that's worth mentioning because it'll stay locked onto a target like a Reinhardt with a shield up. So, that kind of starts to trend towards what I was saying about a coordinated team being able to deal with him much more easily than a quick play random 6-person group. Because if you have someone that can stand out there and draw its lock, then the turret can be dealt with safely. So just be aware of that. You'll be yelling, like, why isn't my turret shooting at the person that's attacking it? It doesn't always do that. It's not necessarily how it works. So just be aware that that's kind of how the lock and the attacking function.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you bring up, because I feel that Torbjorn's turrets are definitely one of those topics similar to Bastion, where a lot of people, especially on console, which is understandable with the control difference, the turrets are a little overpowered. They're hard to get around. Having them automatically aim at you without any input from the user and shoot at you indefinitely is definitely pretty frustrating, especially when it's doing more damage than some of the characters can do, i.e. Winston. If you rush a turret with Winston and you've taken any damage with him, it's very, very likely that you're going to go down before the turret does, especially if it's a level 2. So being aware of how it behaves is really, really important, because as Jeff said, you want to use a coordinated team and kind of draw its fire from somewhere else. And I don't think it's exactly obvious how it behaves right off the bat. So you have to kind of be familiar with it. And so that's the level 1 and 2 turret, and that's actually going to bring us to Torbjorn's ultimate ability, because his ultimate ability not only affects him, but his turret as well. And it's definitely a iconic ability for him, because when he does it, everybody knows. So Torbjorn's ultimate ability is Molten Core. Molten Core is interesting because it's a really cool ability, and it does a few different things. First off, the most obvious thing is Torbjorn screams Molten Core. So everyone's going to hear that both on the ally side and on the opposing team side. So it's very clear that he's doing it. He also gets this really cool effect on him where he drops his mask down, he's like glowing red, and he's just this supercharged Torbjorn, which I think is awesome, and it very much fits his character, and just kind of lends more to that Dwarven look that we see in him. That's an obvious reference to the Warcraft characters. So that's visually what happens. What also happens is he gets a whole bunch of buffs on both him and the turret. So let's kind of run through these. Molten Core, the second you pop it, it lasts a duration of 12 seconds. At that point, your build rate is increased by 100%. So you get 100% efficiency on your building. You get 300 bonus armor on top of your regular health, and your firing rate goes up 50%. So for your normal rivet gun, you actually shoot 50% faster, you build 100% faster, and you get 300 extra armor. So that's a huge buff on just Torbjorn himself. What also happens is his turret, if he has a turret on the field, it will also get an upgrade. So if you have a level 2 turret out, so fully upgraded, it'll actually upgrade to a level 3 or a supercharged turret. Once this happens, it only lasts the duration of Molten Core, which is 12 seconds, but it will also get an astounding 800 HP. So it'll jump from the 300 at level 2 to 800 at level 3. It maintains its 2 guns, but also gets a rocket launcher on top of that. It jumps from 4 rounds per second to 5 rounds per second, so a little bit faster shot, but also it'll shoot 4 rockets per second on top of the guns as well. So you are jumping from 57 damage per second at level 2 with the turret to 181 damage per second with the Molten Core supercharged turret. So this all of a sudden that turns into a weapon that is probably one of the most dangerous things on the battlefield if you're standing next to it.
Molten Core is one of the funnier ults in the game, I'd say, because he yells it out, as you mentioned, but it's just one of those iconic things where you hear it and it's like, oh, should I take cover? Especially with the turret with the 800 health. If you're attacking a point on your own, or you were with a team and you're the only one left, and there's a level 3 turret out, I mean, most characters can't do 800 damage before that turret's going to kill them, so it's better to wait it out if you're playing against a Torb that's ulted. But as Torbjorn, it's really effective. I mean, his turret is just absolutely bananas when you're ulting, and you covered a lot of the benefits that he gets from it. But one thing that's cool about it, I had mentioned this way back in our Widowmaker episode, but this is really the best and probably the only ult in the game that you can use even if you're not there. If you die and your turret is still up and fighting, you can ult when you respawn and your turret will get that buff. Or if you're running back and a team pushes back in, you'll be able to see on your UI that the turret's engaged, and you can ult, and even if you're not there to get your half of the benefit, your turret will become a monster. Yeah,
that's pretty astounding for an ultimate ability because, like you said, being able to use that anywhere on the map, so if I get killed with Torbjorn, but I have a Molten Core ready to use, one of the little things I like to do is I like to scroll through the spectate that you have those few seconds after you die. You can kind of watch your teammates. It's a good way to kind of find out where the enemies are. If they are kind of doing a push and approaching, you can see that ahead of time. And that way, by the time you spawn, you can know whether or not it's a good decision to pop a Molten Core or not. Because if you do have your level 2 turret out there and you pop it, then you're pretty much getting kills without having to be there, which is a staple of the Torbjorn style. I do want to stress, I think I mentioned it before, that the Molten Core level 3 turret only happens if it's a level 2 turret already. So if you have a level 1 turret and you pop Molten Core, it actually won't upgrade that to a level 3 or even a level 2. So you're going to get the most bang out of your ability if you have a level 2 turret first. However, if you do pop Molten Core, let's say you are getting pushed and you only have a level 1 turret out there, that increased build speed will actually help you get it to level 2 quicker, and then from there, you'll have a lot more firepower to deal with. So you're not completely screwed if you don't have a level 2 out there, but just keep that in mind. It's always, always, always best to get a level 2 turret out there as quickly as you can.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you don't have the level 2 turret out to immediately go to level 3, yeah, you can put down a new turret and the increased build speed will let you upgrade it, and then once it gets to 2, yeah, it goes straight to the supercharged turret for whatever time is left on your ult. So don't despair, even if it just so happens that they pushed in and wiped out your turret first, and then you got to ult. I mean, you can get one up pretty quickly and have a good amount of time left. So, yeah, you can still come back from that.
And let's not forget, too, that his actual attack speed goes up as well. So it's not a bad idea to pop Molten Core as just kind of a lifesaver desperation move. You're getting pushed on. Maybe one or two of your teammates have been killed. They're coming after you. Sometimes you want to pop that Molten Core, turret or not. You're going to be able to put out some decent damage really quickly with him, and the increased armor is going to help you survive and might even stop the push if you plan it correctly.
Yep, especially with a nano boost and your hammer out. You Molten Core and you become an absolute monster.
Yeah, I love switching to that hammer with Torbjorn for sure. I know I've gotten pretty good kill streak once with him, and it was astounding. It completely changed the character in my eyes. But yeah, so that's kind of the essential kit for Torbjorn. It's highly based around him building turrets, keeping them upgraded, healing them if necessary. If the turrets do take damage, remember, you can use that hammer, bring back 50 HP. You can't upgrade it until it's at full health, so always keep that in mind. But on top of that, he's rounded out really nicely with a decent attacking weapon as well, and a surprisingly strong melee attack with the hammer. So, yeah, I think he's, if you haven't really messed around with him yet, he's definitely worth a try. I think I've mentioned this to you before as well, Jeff, that I think every single character in Overwatch has a sort of rhythm to them. And what I mean by that is, obviously they all have their abilities. So you can be aware of what their abilities are, what they do. And yeah, I get it. Tracer blinks, Reinhardt puts his shield up, whatever. But what's interesting about it is that if you're familiar with a character, you start to realize, okay, these are the cooldowns. This is the timing of this move. This is when I should use this. And, there's specific characters where when you play them after a while, you start using their abilities in a sort of a pattern. And one of the things I realized the first few times I played Torbjorn, I was like, okay, he's cool, but I'm not really into building turrets, and he's not for me. But I recently had a match where I had a 30-player kill streak with him, which was astounding to me because I literally hadn't touched him in 2 months, and essentially am very basic skill level with him. But what I noticed was different from previous times I played was there was definitely a rhythm. Like I knew when to use when to use his main weapon versus his alt fire. I was starting to be super aware of excellent places around the map to drop the turret that had cover, maybe places that they weren't going to expect it. And you start to get in this sort of rhythm with the character where you're familiar with their abilities, but now you're familiar with the order and how to use them and the most effective ways to use them. So that being said, I think Torbjorn definitely has a rhythm. You're going to want to be super, super aware of what's going on in the battlefield, who can protect you, who can drop shields on you, being around a healer, and also super aware of line of sight and where enemies are going to come in from. I think with Torbjorn, the map knowledge and just being hyper aware of where enemies can reach you and your turret is really key.
So that 30 kill streak, that was in our 6 Torb comp, right?
Actually, no. The 30 kill streak, believe it or not, was in a completely random fight. So it was me and 5 random people, which I'm usually worried about because I definitely prefer playing in a voice chat with friends. But I had a good team, and they kept me alive, and I definitely helped keep them alive.
All right, if you say so. Well, I couldn't agree with you more about map knowledge, and of course, having just played the game for a longer period of time, coming back to Torb, I'm not surprised to hear that you did much better than you expected with him, because knowing the maps is a big part of this. Not just to know where to put the turret to anticipate enemies, but just kind of knowing where to move it as a second and a third and a fourth place, because you want to be smart about your turret and move it around. Similar to Bastion, I mean, if they know where it is, they're going to try and deal with it as, step one to push in the point. So, yeah, I mean, you want to make it unpredictable where maybe they try and extend to get to where they think it is and it's firing at them from another direction or something like that. Every map's different, so you have to kind of play around with the spots that you like. But yeah, just in general, just be smart with it, and he can be a really effective character. So in your time with Torb recently, since you picked him back up, what characters have you found him to be most effective against, and what characters have given you a lot of trouble as Torb?
I'd say it's really tricky because I feel when you're Torb, there's this weird thing that happens, at least in a lot of the matches I've been in, where people tend to ignore you and they kind of focus on your turret instead, because the turret can auto-aim. It does a decent amount of damage. So what's cool about it is that regardless of who I'm coming across, I usually can get the drop on them with Torb's main weapon because they're focused on the turret. And I think as a good Torb player, you want to make sure that you're constantly keeping an eye on your turret, not necessarily being right next to it all the time, because you can look down at the bottom of your screen and look at the health and see if it's being attacked. But that being said, I'd say probably anybody with lower HP with little means of defending themselves, someone like Reaper or Tracer, who has to get in close to do any sort of significant damage, are probably the people that Torb is most effective against. It's really just about someone who is going to drop quickly when trying to approach the turret. So once again, turret placement's huge on that because you want to put it in a place that's hard to reach and that you can defend. If you see them going after it, you're doing ridiculous damage with either your rivet gun or your hammer, and then get right to repairing it from any damage it's taken. That being said, I think characters that excel against a turret, generally going to be the opposite of that. It's going to be your higher HP characters, but higher HP that can do decent amount of damage. I think just playing from the other side, Diva is a great counter to the turrets, especially with her new and improved defense matrix. You can, boost and fly right up to a turret with the shield, take no damage, and get right up in its face. And Diva does a pretty awesome amount of damage at close range, so she can take out a turret pretty quickly and not worry about dying with her high HP pool. So I think she's going to be a great counter to the Torbjorn turret and to Torbjorn himself. And also characters that can do a lot of splash damage from a distance. Characters like Farah or Junkrat, I think, are a nightmare for Torbjorn because they can essentially shoot from afar, and they don't even have to hit the turret directly. They can do a lot of splash damage and take them out that way. So your biggest fear as Torbjorn is going against a character who can do damage from long distances and take out your turrets so quickly that you really have nothing you can do against it.
I think you're on the right track there with the distance thing. I don't know if we mentioned before, but the turrets do have a max range. I think I read it was like 50 meters or something, which is hard to really know what that is in game. But they've got a good range, but not max range. So because of that, I think the sniper characters can do pretty well against them if the Torb has been silly enough to set his turret up where a sniper can get to it from a mile away. And then I agree with Farah, obviously, is a natural counter to that. Junkrat, sometimes, but depending on, if Torb is smart with his turret placement, it can be tough for Junkrat to get to it from a good distance. And, his grenades can be a little bit tricky with the trajectory to get him out there. But definitely Diva and Reinhardt are going to be really hard counters to him. Maybe not Rein by himself necessarily. I mean, he can deal with the turret, but really Reinhardt in conjunction with one of these other characters is going to take a turret out without anyone having taken damage. I would say that Torb is really strong against most of the support characters. Any 200 health point character, if he can get him clean, is going to go down pretty quickly. Genji, I think he gives a lot of trouble to. Genji can deal with the turret on his own, but it's going to take a lot of effort. He'll probably have to use his deflect and probably take some damage doing it. McCree, too, I think he can do some damage from long range now, but not what he could before, so he's going to want to get to medium range, and he's certainly going to take damage trying to deal with the turret. And then, maybe Symmetra he's strong against, but, I mean, you generally don't see Torb and Symmetra on opposite sides of a map. They're both typically selected on defense, so that's kind of, in theory, but in reality, you wouldn't see that too often.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So then, I guess moving on to just kind of, as you've been playing Torb recently, what are some tips or tricks or tendencies that you've picked up that we haven't already covered so far?
For me, I think the most fun I have with Torbjorn, and I think the most effective thing you could do is try to place the turrets in really, really unexpected areas. I think, with any character, we tend to fall into these habits that we have certain areas of the map that we like to stick to. And I feel it's definitely the same for Torbjorn players, where you'll generally see a turret. I can go through each map and think of just very specific areas that I always see a turret. And you're almost looking for it as a opposing player. Okay, there's going to be one, on that top bridge right through the gate of Temple of Anubis. Okay, there's going to be one right on the bridge before you go around the left corner at the beginning of Route 66. So putting them, in these open spaces is sometimes good because that's where the characters are going to try to go through, and that's where they're trying to get to the payload or the control point. But I also like to look for places that people don't necessarily go through a lot, or putting them around corners and things like that, so it's not right in the space, because the best thing you could do with this turret is get the jump on a character who's not expecting it. And what's cool about that is very similar to a sniper like Widowmaker, or a turret character like Bastion, is when you do get a couple of those kills, you can immediately build another turret. It'll get rid of your previous one and put it somewhere else that they won't expect. So I think the best thing for you to do in that situation is, after you kill someone, wait about 10 seconds until their kill cam is through, then drop it somewhere else. And that way you're constantly having this essentially mobile turret that always keeps appearing somewhere different where people don't expect it. It's good to stick to places that are going to be effective, but you don't want to be too predictable, because essentially what you're going to have are situations where people are just immediately going to pick a counter character like Pharah and just take it out, and then you're running around trying to build turrets while you're getting pushed on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I can't reiterate enough, the key to Torb, I think, is map knowledge. Like you mentioned, Route 66. Yeah, most of the time you're going to see a turret put right on that bridge, right over top of the payload at the beginning. But, if you're really smart about it, if you put it further back, on top of the gas station, that's a better angle to create a choke, where the other team has to come around that corner, and that turret can cover all directions. But it also can't be focused down from max range. They have to come around a corner to attack it. So that's just one example, but just in general, you don't want to put it where it's just out in the open, even if it's the most direct way to attack where you think the enemies will come from, because it's going to get taken out really quickly. It's funny, in general, I feel that my enjoyment and my effectiveness as Torb seem to correspond to me taking games a little bit less seriously. Or maybe drinking more, but
I don't disagree.
Yeah, if I'm in a really competitive mindset, I'm gonna want to play one of my stronger, more reliable characters like Soldier, McCree, or Pharah. But I would normally, in a competitive mindset, I wouldn't think to myself, oh, I can put this turret on this moving platform on Volskaya, and it's just gonna roll out into the courtyard and shoot at the other team. I would think that's a terrible idea, but sometimes it's really effective, especially in quick play.
Oh, no,
So,
it is definitely effective. Well, it's funny you say that, not to interrupt, but you don't really see him in the competitive scene with the high-level players, right?
Not often. I mean, it can be done, especially with his armor packs. I think he brings more to the table than just the turret, like a Bastion. I think the armor packs make him more viable. But no, I mean, he's not being selected regularly, certainly not on anything but defense.
So that brings up an interesting question then, because, we've discussed this in the past with other characters, and everybody has their 2 cents on each character, who's underpowered, who's overpowered. But what do you do with a character like that, where on the very casual, just getting into the game scene, quick play, you're seeing, people having trouble against Torbjorn and these turrets, and they're frustrated. But then on the high-level scene, you're seeing he's not really being selected at all because he's so easy to counter. Is it something where, in that situation, normally what you do is you buff the character so they're more viable and competitive, but is that going to screw over the more casual players? Is it going to make it less fun for the larger percent of the population? I don't necessarily have an answer for that, but I'm kind of curious to what your opinion is on that.
Well, I mean, I think in general they have to balance an overpowered problem based on the high-end competitive scene, because it's going to ruin the spectator side of it. So that's what you saw with like Widow and McCree early on. Mm-hmm. When you have a character where you're talking about a character, or in this case maybe an entire group of characters, the defense characters that seem to be underutilized, I think that's the next challenge. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I think that the balance is as good as it's been so far, just in terms of not having 1 or 2 characters that are must-picks. Right now there's a lot of options, and I think it's pretty situational for the most part. But the situation where you'd want to pick almost any of the defense characters is pretty hard to find. I mean, maybe an argument could be made for Junkrat, especially since people are afraid to play Pharah right now with the Orb of Discord out there. But if you take Junkrat out of it, all the other defense characters are virtually ignored by the pros. And yet, in quick play, they seem to be extremely effective. I mean, it can feel at times in quick play when you're playing with, if me and you go and play with 4 random people, it's hard to get everyone on the same page in terms of character selection and certainly in terms of in-game coordination. So it can feel impossible to take a control point when there's a Bastion and a Torbjorn set up in there. But it's not.
No, not at all, clearly.
So, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, so like I said, it's the whole defense group, and on the high end, I think it's all about mobility right now, and the defense group doesn't have any, so I get why they're put in the defense group. They're there to cover a zone, but that's just not the priority right now on the high end, and that's not really what we're seeing at all. So I don't really know exactly what the answer is. I mean, it's similar to Bastion. We talked about if you buffed him so that high-end people would want to play him, then he would just completely take over quick play. I think the answer is probably something more of a complete redesign, which is tough to imagine them redesigning, 5 or 6 characters at the same time. But in some way to give them some other benefits or skills instead of just buffing a % of damage or something like that. So I had this idea after we talked Bastion last week, but like if they made his recon mode more actual reconnaissance, like maybe he can hear from twice as far away, or something like that, where there's a reason to be in your recon mode and not just always be sitting in sentry mode, and by association you would become more mobile. So like with Torb, I don't know, I mean, maybe they could do something where they nerf the health on his level 3 turret when he molten cores, but it's mobile and it's on auto follow and it just follows Torb around and fires, something like that.
Oh my god.
I mean, but they would have to bring it down a little bit.
I agree.
But just, to try and balance it where it's not going to be completely broken, but he can move around a little bit more. Something like that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a game designer, but it's a tough thing to grapple with right now because it's a whole group of characters that are immobile in a game that encourages mobility.
Yeah, it's... The defense, and it's a shame because, as you know, I'm a huge fan of Mei. She's probably my favorite character in the game, and she's in the defense class as well. What's really interesting, I'd say, with the defense class is that they are all dramatically different from each other. You know, you look at someone like Torbjorn compared to May, and then May to Widowmaker, and then Widowmaker to Bastion. I mean, these are all characters that have very pronounced abilities, but like you said, most of them do kind of lack that high mobility, and man, that mobility is just so important in this game. I'm really not sure what the answer is. I would love to see maybe slight redesigns on some of them, but the biggest redesign we've really seen in the game, outside of, you know, increased or decreased cooldowns and HP, is really Diva. I mean, that's the closest, most dramatic redesign we've seen to a character, where they completely changed how her shield works, the mechanics of it, and that one change really rebalanced and made that character a lot more viable. So it's not something that we necessarily won't see, but I don't know how likely it is that we're going to see a complete redesign of abilities, or even the addition of new abilities on some of these characters. It'd be exciting to see in what they come up with, but if I don't know, if it's not being utilized, if the characters aren't being utilized on the competitive scene, I feel that that's gonna raise some flags for Blizzard, because as I've said before, they want every character to be viable, they want every character to be good, but not at the detriment of the masses that play your game. And you know, you pick a character and suddenly, you know, I just started this game and I can't figure this out at all because this character is just killing me every single time. So yeah, it's a balance that's tricky to achieve. I'm really curious if you guys want to send us any of your ideas. I don't even care how crazy it is. Definitely hit us up and let us know what maybe rebalancing or a change of abilities you would like to see, because I think it's definitely a conversation that should be happening.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's unrealistic to expect all the characters in the game to be equally selected. I mean, that's just never going to happen. There's going to be player preferences, and there's just always going to be some characters that feel stronger than others or are easier to be good with than others. But yeah, when you have a whole group of them, it makes you think that they're going to want to do something about that. And when you look at what they did to Zenyatta's Transcendence, I mean, people weren't necessarily asking for that speed boost, but they gave it to him. So that does show that mobility is on their radar as something that characters might be weak if they lack. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I can't see them giving all these characters sprint or anything like that. And it feels like they're, for the most part, they're pretty complete characters as they are. I mean, I like May, and I like that I like her kit as a whole. I like Junkrat a lot. So yeah, it's tough to say exactly where they'll go with it, but I'm definitely interested to see if they try and do something to address it. Well,
for the moment, Torbjorn as a character, he is definitely a lot of fun to play, and I think he's viable in your non-top-of-the-line, high-competitive games. So definitely give him a try out if you haven't yet. He is a character that has drastically different abilities than a lot of the other characters in the game. He's your quintessential builder character. The turret is nothing to laugh at. It is super effective. And then combining that with Torbjorn's own abilities is definitely intimidating if you don't know how to approach it. So try him out. Let us know what you guys think. Torbjorn is pretty awesome. He's a hilarious character, great with the lore, great gameplay style, and get out there and build some turrets. So thank you guys very much for listening to this latest character breakdown on Torbjorn. I'm sure there's a whole lot we didn't cover, so if there's anything that you have, strategies, feedback, opinions, let us know. You could reach us on social media, Twitter via @HappyJamOP, and you can also reach Jeff at TruthfitterOP as well. You can reach us on our Facebook page. Just search the OP Overwatch Podcast on Facebook, and also you can visit us directly on our website, oppodcast.com. If you feel more comfortable contacting us by email, my email is happyjamop@gmail.com. And yeah, just let us know any of your opinions, any thoughts, maybe some ideas for future episodes. We're almost through with the character breakdowns. We'll be hitting map breakdowns next, and I'm really excited about that because there is a lot to be said on the maps. So once again, thank you all for listening. This has been the OP Overwatch Podcast, and we'll see you next time.